We're going live to Joe Biden's comments immediately about the Trump shooting.
Good afternoon. Last night, I spoke with Donald Trump. I'm sincerely grateful that he's doing well and recovering, and we had a short but good conversation. Jill and I are keeping him and his family in our prayers. We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victim who was killed. He was a father. He was protecting his family from the bullets that were being fired, and he lost his life. God love him. We're also praying for the full recovery of those who were injured. And we're grateful to the Secret Service agents and other law enforcement agencies and individuals who risked their lives literally for our nation. As I said last night, there is no place in America for this kind of violence or any violence for that matter. An assassination attempt is contrary to everything we stand for as a nation, everything. It's not who we are as a nation. It's not America. And we cannot allow this to happen. Unity is the most elusive goal of all, but nothing is important than that right now, unity. We'll debate and we'll disagree. That's not going to change, but we're going to not lose sight of the fact who we are as Americans. Look, Vice President Harris and I were just briefed in the Situation Room by my Homeland Security team, including the Director of the FBI, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General, the Director of the Secret Service, my Homeland Security Advisor, the National Security Advisor, and we're going to continue to be briefed. The FBI is leading this investigation, which is still in its early stages. We don't yet have any information about the motive of the shooter. We know who he is. I urge everyone, please, don't make assumptions about his motives or his affiliations. Let the FBI do their job and their partner agencies do their job. I'm instructed that this investigation be thorough and swift, and the investigators will have every resource they need to get this done. Look, as this investigation continues, here's what we're going to do. First, Mr. Trump, as a former president and nominee of the Republican Party, already receives a heightened level of security. And I've been consistent in my direction to the Secret Service to provide him with every resource, capability, and protective measure necessary to ensure his continued safety. Second, I've directed the head of the Secret Service to review all security measures for the Republican National Convention, which is scheduled to start tomorrow. And third, I've directed an independent review of the national security at yesterday's rally to assess exactly what happened. And we'll share the results of that independent review with the American people as well. And finally, I'll be speaking more about this tonight at greater length from the Oval Office. We must unite as one nation. We must unite as one nation to demonstrate who we are. And so may God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, when you spoke to President Trump yesterday, what did he tell you, sir?
Mr. President, shifting your campaign strategy, Mr. President, do you regret?
So, yeah, there was Biden speaking very, very briefly to the American people, addressing them now for the second time. Here's Biden once again addressing the American people very briefly for the second time. And, of course, this is in the wake of Donald Trump, an assassination attempt against him while he was campaigning in Pennsylvania, just north of Pittsburgh. I'm going to go through the Republican response, which is all ready to blame Joe Biden for this, shooting attempt, which is, suspected. But I think as we head into the Republican National Convention this week, we're talking right now on Sunday, this is the 14th, and I've done a power report on Thursday, now Saturday and Sunday. And as we head into the Republican convention on Monday, coming through the rest of this week, we're going to get a theme here that has been radically shifted by this historic event. I'm going to get into some of these pieces in a moment, but since I'm recording live, I will jump in for some comments. Thank you all for being in here right now. Nachiket says, good day and to the best of luck to all. Yes, I very much agree as well. This is something we have to be really careful about. Rosalba 14 already talking about the fact that, this is a good opportunity to talk about guns, and the access to them that we have. What we know about the shooter and the information is still coming in. It hasn't even been a full day since this shooting occurred. And what we do know is that this gun was obtained legally, with an L, legally. This gun was obtained legally by the shooter's father. So I tell the video Cold Dog, I just jumped in. Did he really suspend his campaign? Joe Biden has suspended advertisements. He has suspended campaign stops. And I think he's doing this for a number of reasons. The top two, I believe, are number one, because he wants to, kind of show respect in this moment. You don't run campaign ads while your opponent is recovering, however minor, from an assassination attempt. And number two, this is now a tit for tat situation where Trump supporters will feel like, oh, someone attacked their guy. You could possibly see people trying to attack Joe Biden as well. And, it's sad that it comes to that kind of situation. But in a lot of ways, Joe Biden has suspended his campaign. He's canceled his events for the time being. He's cutting down on ads. The third reason that I was just talking about is because there's this whole thing going around about him being unfit to be the Democratic nominee and unfit to be president, just mentally and physically already. That's been dominating the news cycle for the past week. That was the summer surprise, right? / summer news cycle bugaboo. And this is definitely a great time to pause and regroup and kind of look at the party and what they're doing as well, and kind of get a sense of what's going on there too. I'm going to pause for a second because of an ambulance. And so one thing I want to really get at right now is how quickly the Republican Party is shifting to an angle of, I know exactly who to blame, and that person is Joe Biden. That's right. It's Joe Biden's fault that this, shooting occurred. It's Joe Biden heating up the political rhetoric. It's Joe Biden amping up his voting base. It's Joe Biden who gave me a noogie in the hallway. It's Joe Biden this, it's Joe Biden that. It's definitely a tried out trope at this point. And we're going to get to, just to ground ourselves here, what has actually been going on with our lying eyes ever since Donald Trump entered the political scene since 2016, how much he's incited violence. Let's not even go to 2016. Let's not even go to 2020. Let's talk about the 2024 election and how much he's incited violence. But you can go all the way back, and we're definitely going to just a moment. But for all intents and purposes right now, politics is paused. It just so happens that it's pausing right before the Republican National Convention. And so they are going to get to make a splash Monday morning when politics starts really happening again. So what I want to do now is play a clip from Fox and Friends Sunday. This was one of the first things to kind of come on as, you know, people were reacting on the Sunday morning talk show circuit. And you were kind of getting a sense from how Tim Scott, who has been named as a potential vice presidential pick, keep in mind, Donald Trump hasn't picked his vice presidential nominee. So in that sort of morbid designated survivor situation, you wouldn't actually know who all those delegates would go to. It would really be a mad dash of the convention. But here, Tim Scott, who, you know, in a world where Kamala Harris is the vice presidential pick, maybe Tim Scott has an opportunity there because he helps to deflect some of the racial attacks that would inevitably be used in this situation, or, you know, deflect from the accusations of racial attacks the Republicans will inevitably have in the situation that Democrats could, you know, easily weaponize for better or worse. And what you get here is Tim Scott, and I'm able to watch as much of this as I can here, or like, you know, get the clip of as much of this as I could here because it was happening in real time. But Tim Scott is, what I think, revealing the angle with which he's going to use, with which he and the Republican Party are going to use to rally Trump after this. Remember, after that original video of what happened, he, you know, triumphantly raised his fist and said, hang on, we've got to do this. We've got to do this. And so here's some of Tim Scott speaking here. Oh, sorry. I have it on mute. I had it on mute.
Doing them. A lot of people don't have confidence in the FBI, who will be running this investigation. This is the FBI, as you know, that raided Mar-a-Lago, that has, you know, focused and become obsessed with J6ers and pursuing them. You have, you know, everything else that they have done. I can't find the pipe bomber from January 6th. How can we trust that this investigation by the FBI, which so many people think is compromised, is actually going to come up with the truth? Because this is imperative to our democracy.
There's no doubt Speaker Johnson has said it very well. There must be a full and thorough vetting of what happened. But more importantly, to your point, the facts are simply this. When the Department of Justice start labeling parents coming to a school board meeting as domestic terrorists, what do you think the people are going to say around the liberal doctrine is to eliminate the threat of conservatism? It's no longer a partisan debate. That's why we have to have a strong, complete, and thorough investigation. But the only way, in my opinion, and I mean this sincerely, to purge the Department of Justice of the challenges, the inconsistencies that we've seen over the last couple of years is to re-elect Donald Trump. We have to have someone in charge. When President Trump was in office, he did not use the DOJ to go after Hillary Clinton. He did the right thing. He focused on the American people. The
idea that he didn't use the DOJ to go after Hillary Clinton. He talked about using the DOJ to go after his political enemies. He now has the ability to use the DOJ to go after his political enemies. I don't like. But there's immediate angle that, okay, well, we can't trust the FBI. Meanwhile, it's a full-on investigation. This was in the morning before Joe Biden announces one thing, but like the idea that you can't trust the FBI because it's been weaponized to go after Donald Trump is this entire implication that Donald Trump has done nothing wrong. It's that Donald Trump has done none of these crimes, right? Like, it's a ridiculous assumption. It's a ridiculous assertion that they have right here. Nevertheless, they're going to continue to push it. But let's continue here.
This DOJ has been so politicized, so weaponized, that they've made the primary target of their objectives conservatives, and at the top of that chain, is Donald Trump. So
But
we
he
have
has
to
to
purge
win.
them
To
by
win, he
firing
has.
Garland.
But Senator, to win, he has to stay alive. I mean, this is
No
a serious
question.
moment right now.
Also, I found this article from the New York Times, and I am not going to use their like paywall thing, but at least this was from May 2023. The Justice Department investigated the Clinton Foundation until Donald Trump's final days. So apparently, he and his allies had a years-long investigation using the Justice Department. So he did weaponize the Justice Department. I don't want to speak out of turn there, but he did weaponize the Justice Department to investigate the Clinton Foundation. So that's just an outright lie. And once again, the Supreme Court has the ability to do that now. So look how Tim Scott, who's one of the leading vice presidential picks, I'm not going to say right now who it's going to be because the situation is developing so rapidly, and Donald Trump's supposed to pick this at the Republican convention this week. JD Vance is another popular pick, but you know, there's always the curveball idea that he just goes with Donald Trump Jr. or something. But Tim Scott and a lot of other conservatives here are taking this is Joe Biden's fault. There's even one elected official who's like, oh, this is a false flag. But they're saying that this is Joe Biden's fault. He's taking the political, heat in the country and making it and taking it to a point where this political violence is occurring. So, it's always what they do. It's this reflective mirror jujitsu flip denial sort of thing they're doing, because heightening the rhetoric, politicians talked really boring until Donald Trump got on the scene, and then started saying that Mexicans were rapists and they were murdering women at the border and stuff like that. Like, politics, at least outwardly facing, was different before Donald Trump. So the common refrain, especially towards political enemies, and the way Donald Trump was talking about political enemies, was from Democrats saying that that he was going overboard. So let's watch more of this here.
I do not have the confidence that this Department of Justice will do the right thing, period. That's a full stop. I can't say it any clearer than that. That is why we must focus on doing everything in our power to make sure that the next several months that President Trump is able to be on the campaign trail. He rose yesterday. He was going to be silenced. He didn't stay down. He didn't just rise up. He had his fist in the air. He had focus in his eyes. There was fire. He was ticked off because he understands that I said this before, if you can do it to the former president of the United States, what about the rest of us?
If you can, okay, so now he's trying to externalize this out as though this sort of political assassination could happen to everyone. And yeah, Tim Scott, I guess in a way it could, because we have a country with more guns than there are people, and you could get shot on the street and for any other different reason. They love pointing to what's going on in Chicago, like in 4th of July, where they had a bunch of shootings over 4th of July weekend, which happens in a lot of places in this country over every weekend. But they love pointing to that as a sign of, urban crime and democratic, policies or whatever, and not a factor of what America is like. So instead, they're trying to wrap it into what they've been saying this whole time. The FBI is going to persecute people who vote for Trump. And that's this whole thing. It's this whole cycle from top to bottom. It's a persecution complex of, we feel aggrieved because there's a rising political class and a changing political dynamic in this country where Black people, brown people, women of all colors and sexual orientations, and now we have other gender expressions and people who are non-binary completely, who are now trying to make their voice heard. And in making their voices heard, and by talking about some of the things and some of the struggles that they and their ancestors have had in the past, by expressing themselves in the workplace, in culture, in society, and in government, especially in places of power like in the corporate structures, people are finding that just their presence and just the expression of those things is making them feel threatened. And it's gotten to a point where politicians and the media, especially on the right wing, specifically on the right wing, have found that just the threat of that, whether it exists or it doesn't, is enough to ignite their base. And so you see all of that culminate right here when you have someone like Tim Scott, who is saying and arguing that this is just going to be a reflection of how they note that the shooter is apparently a registered Republican, are coming after you, you regular person. It's, I wish I could say they had shame, but they don't.
They want us cowering in corners. I'll be darned if we're going to do so. We're going to take our lives and have a normal Sunday, go praise God, and then get ready for Monday because the convention starts. We patriots must do our jobs by being present. This country is at a fork in the road, and we will choose right.
And that's the other last thing I want to really point out here, is that you are getting a major pivot towards, God and miracles, especially when you're seeing how, it was just his ear that was shot up and he defiantly, raised his fist in the air, which I need to remind people again exactly what happened and how that went down, because thankfully I never closed tabs on my computer. And so I have the video from yesterday. And so you'll be able to hear how Trump is actually reacting to these things as he's getting up. So you'll start to hear some of the stuff from the microphone because the microphone was still working at the time. And you will hear how he's kind of thinking of the optics immediately as he's getting up. So watch this here.
I got you, sir. I got you, sir. Let me get my shoes, sir. Hold that in your head. It's bloody. So we gotta move to the bus. Let me get my shoes. Okay, watch out. Wait.
Secret Service is telling him, we got to move. And Donald Trump's going, no. Let me get my shoes. Wait. And then he does the fist bump. So it's not this like defiant, he's going to be strong. He's going to be, rah thing that people in the media like Tim Scott are now going to be peddling, especially Republicans. He knew it was going to, I'm not saying the entire thing was a conspiracy theory. I'm saying that Donald Trump immediately knew what the optics of the moment would look like if he was grazed by a bullet and was able to, with the blood still all over his face, jump up and raise his fist and yell, fight to his base and get that all on camera while looking towards where he was talking to on camera. It's smart campaigning. And for those who were really quickly, well, here's what I was going to say. Because people in the chat were like, oh, you're being clickbaity. First of all, writing the line. Second of all, here is the story, one of the stories I'm talking about here. This is from last night where Biden had, or early this morning, where Biden had condemned the shooting and said that he was going to suspend campaign ads. I can't find the article immediately right now because I was trying to, but what we did have was news that Joe Biden canceled a campaign stop. And like I said, there's 3 reasons for why that's happening. And you're seeing this pair back. One, it's just sort of like a respectful thing to do. If a I'm not saying Donald Trump would do the other thing around if the other thing were happening, but I am saying that in a normal situation, let's say you have a general, heated race in a battleground state for Senate between a Democrat and a Republican. I think Dr. Oz canceled campaign ads when Fetterman had a stroke, right? For example. I could be wrong, but usually like at that level of a race, even with those sorts of like, characters, let's say, you would do that out of respect. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is that that was the ex-president who almost got pew-pewed, and he is the current president who is in increased danger of being pew-pewed for a number of different reasons. You don't have to even know much about the shooter, which we'll talk about in a moment, but you can speculate as to the heightened amount of security that's going to be taken from this case. Those are the top two reasons. Anyone, regardless of political ideology, should be able to agree with those two reasons. The third reason that I think I feel pretty confident about, but maybe never everyone was talking about, as I said earlier, is because I believe the Joe Biden team would love a breather from all of this continued kvetching about his age, Joe Biden's physical fitness, his mental fitness, whether he's stuttering or stammering over things. Now he gets to look really presidential whenever he's speaking because now he's talking about political violence and the importance of that. And so all of that is really interesting. Definitely, as I said, politics is pausing. Just as I will right now pause for comments really quickly. So Emo Dragon with a $5 super chat saying, I'm trying to hold on to any optimism I can find. It's increasingly difficult. I'm of the mind that nothing matters until Supreme Court of the United States is reformed. Thank you for the $5 super chat. And Emo Dragon, I I think even before reform, I think, and I really won't support a president, and I can forgive a lot for a presidential candidate if they were to say the following thing. If they were to wink and nod a little bit at court packing, and they were to say, listen, for a number of reasons, the balance of the Supreme Court is off, and as president, they will, or they would, just start packing the courts as long as they get the Democratic House, the Democratic Senate, I'd be really happy about that. I think you'd have to pull a little bit of a bait and switch, honestly, if you were a politician doing this. So I don't totally, know how you would campaign on it. But that's what I think you need to do in the short term because the Supreme Court can do short to medium term damage. I think in the medium to long term, yeah, you do need to reform the Supreme Court. But I think there's a lot of reasons beyond the Supreme Court to not have hope and a lot of reasons beyond the Supreme Court to have hope. Generally at like more the local levels to have hope. So these are definitely tumultuous times and politics is kind of paused and ever moving, I'll say. Let me read some more comments before I continue on because I actually have some stuff. I knew I was going to continue, but yes. Anti-corporatist, you saw that your things were shutting down. You linked here. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, I saw a good burst of people coming in, so that was good. Bam saying Biden did well at the Detroit rally. That's great. No one saw it. Like people, the rallies will be covered and there will be some like good moments and clips from those, but the moments where Biden has had uninterrupted TV time, uninterrupted time on the internet, I have found him to be really lackluster, and the gaffes have created more issues than anything else. Rizal also saying, yes, my response is more to Joe's talk about our nation not being a place for violence. Violence is all this country knows. 100%. Bad Lefty saying Joe Biden's not fit to be in charge of the grill at a barbecue. Yeah, the news is going to be very, very interesting tomorrow. I don't even know how that is going to be. I'm not going to even, so also just a blanket thing. I am generally pretty liberal with comments on this right now, but I don't want to oh god, there's so much more Tim Scott. That's great. I don't want to even highlight or pretend to highlight some of these conspiracy theories that are going out, so I'm not going to do that. Anyways, let's see. Lorelli Martinez Neto says, why suspend campaign ads? Trump is fine. Dems are such P words. I think you would. This is a really monumental thing. Joe Biden, I mean, Donald Trump, in addition to being a opponent, is an ex-president. Like, this is part of, Biden making the case that he is taking the moral high ground, because you really don't know if Donald Trump would do the same thing. You really don't know. Joe Biden would and is, and you could say is intimately aware of some of these things. ZZZZ saying, doesn't that make it all easier for Joe Biden to step down now? And Del Sol Verde responding saying, saying Biden is definitely not going to step aside. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways you can go after this. Parker says, I think yesterday's event may have given Biden enough time to run out the clock and not have enough time to replace him. That can definitely happen. It definitely, I think, shortens the window of opportunity for... It definitely shortens the window of opportunity a little bit for folks within the party to express their concerns. You could say, okay, we really need to batten down the hatches now. We're in a historic, every day counts. Every day we're like walking on eggshells and pins and needles with our very democracy as it stands. And we need to really focus on making sure we get Joe Biden through the finish line and winning. I think that can definitely be the narrative. I think another way to see this, which is the outright reality, which is what I said after his NATO thing, which, on the substance went okay. And he showed his breadth of foreign policy, but had a bunch of different gaffes coming out of it. Donald Trump had the clip where Biden says, it's so confusing every time I describe it because Joe Biden made it so confusing. But Donald Trump reposted a clip of Joe Biden referring to Vice President Harris as Vice President Trump. So Biden said Vice President Trump at the very beginning of his post-NATO speech that was televised across every single network on multiple platforms around the world. And it was full of a lot of gaffes like that. And on Power Report, Bam and I made the argument that you can look through history and Joe Biden has made gaffes about the presidency and the vice presidency and who was in what position as far back as his own announcement the day he was announced as Barack Obama's vice presidential nominee. So he's been doing this even when he was more mentally cogent, but the optics surrounding his physical mental fitness are still there and still fresh. So given all of that, I think it would be nice for him to suspend his campaign. It would allow him and the party to regroup. And it would force, I think, the Republicans to kind of show their hands a little bit. They're going to go all out with this. They're going to, I hate to say it because it kind of sounds bad, but it's true. They're going to milk this attempted assassination for everything it's worth. And from there, I think you'll also have a lot of time to see what the polling of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden is like even before this weekend, because the polling is going to be really useless until 2 weeks from now. Like, Next Sunday, maybe 2 Sundays from now, a little bit, but even then 2 Sundays from now, it's going to be really influenced by the post-convention boost. But right now, the post-convention boost has got like NOS, it's got like jet fuel, it's got a rocket on it. Because Donald Trump is widely seen as having won the debate, so much so that the news cycle has been filled with stories of Democrats thinking about Joe Biden stepping out of the race, Joe Biden responding by overexerting himself. Meanwhile, Donald Trump defiantly puts his fist up in the air in response to an assassination attempt. We're out of like Sorkin territory, and it's officially like Wes Anderson. So it's really weird. It's really weird. Jules T also saying Donald J. Trump is going to make a bank. Yeah, absolutely. What you can do. I see you in chat as well. Good to see you. I'm going to play a little bit more of Tim Scott from Fox and Friends here because there's so much going on. Oh, also, here's some more comments from Parker I want to save and mention. I think yesterday's event, oh yeah, we mentioned this already, actually. But y'all, Darlene said, remember when, speaking of the deep state, Trump said they need him to get out of their way so that they can come after you. Definitely dangerous and uncertain times we're experiencing. Be safe. Yeah, a lot of folks have been saying, and I mentioned this on the coverage yesterday, if you think the police were cracking down under the Biden administration or under the Trump administration or under the Obama administration, you ain't seen nothing yet. Oh, baby, you ain't seen nothing yet. Okay, back to more Tim Scott. Sorry, I've never wanted to say that phrase or impart that onto even my enemies, but more Tim Scott.
Well, Senator Pete mentioned it. You are on the short list for vice president. That has renewed importance today. Whoever Donald Trump picks as his vice president, obviously, with this type of threat to his life, the vice presidency has a potentiality of being someone who could step right into the president. In fact, Harris Faulkner had a sit down yesterday with Donald Trump just before this incident, and he brought up the importance for that very reason of the vice presidency. Watch.
They say, oh, it depends on what's going to happen, who you're going to pick. I don't think so. You're going to pick a great person, you're going to run. The other thing I've noticed, if you look, I don't want to belittle it because it's a very important position, especially if something bad should happen, but that's the most important, if something bad should happen.
So, Senator, what do you think the events of the last 12 hours have changed? The calculus of the last 14, 16 hours have changed in any way Donald Trump's calculation on who's going to run with him as vice president?
I don't think so. President Trump has said the same thing over and over again. He wants someone ready to be president on day one. And whoever that person is, the person who has the honor to serve as his number two, what they're going to do is carry out President Trump's mission. He already has his priorities set for the American people. He understands that stopping and eliminating a 10 million person illegal immigration invasion is job one. He knows that fixing the economy that Joe Biden has devastated for the working class people is job number two. He understands that making sure that law and order is restored, that we no longer talk about defunding the police, we start refunding local police. He understands that is the objective. President Trump, whoever he chooses, will have a vice president who will carry out his mission with him for 4 consecutive years, because I believe Donald Trump will not only win, but he will serve the entire time. But having someone prepared to continue his mission is absolutely essential, and it's what he said.
Yeah, I'm sorry I even played that because it's just like sycophancy, because he's trying to prepare for the vice presidency potentially, being nominated as the vice president. So basically, I will do your tax cuts for the rich. I will, work in my best ability to advocate for those. I will be as mean, if not meaner, than any Democratic or Republican president before me when it comes to the immigration question. Remember, this is the same political party that was talking about cutting off the educational visas of students who are protesting in favor of Palestine and against the actions of Israel in the wake of October 7th, where they've killed, the official undercount, let's say, is 38,000 civilians in the situation. Imagine if they do that for like any other political topic they're talking about. Also, I love this pause point for Tim Scott because he looks very it's a very chuck and jive kind of thing. Let me actually make sure I have the captions off so I can get a clean, mean and clean. Yeah, there we go. Let's okay, that's gonna be a great part for the thumbnail. Should I make it? Anyways, let's play more.
Prepared to continue his mission is absolutely essential, and it's what he said every single time he's been asked that question.
Well, Senator, you started by referencing scripture. You're a man of faith. Just as we close here, what's your reflection this morning?
I think we as a nation must be very prepared to stay on our knees before the Lord. I believe that we are a country founded on Judeo-Christian principles. Those principles teach us to be respectful and to be responsible, but always stand in the fire. Proverbs 31:8 says that we should stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. That is why I'm a proud supporter of Donald Trump. He consistently rises to the moment. His personal life in jeopardy, he still stands because there's something more important than the individual. It is the call of God to do what you're called to do in spite of the consequences. God bless Donald Trump, and God, please continue to bless the United States of America.
Senator Tim Scott, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Sir.
Thank you, Senator.
So I think that's just a preview of what's to come. Frankly, you're going to see a substantial amount of God protected Donald Trump, God saved Donald Trump, this is a miracle, looked at what happened, and that this is an example of everything Donald Trump has been talking about. They're going to tie the deep state arguments. They're going to tie in the weaponized Department of Justice. They're going to tie in, coming after Trump with these so-called bogus felonies. And, I think it's all going to work. I really think it's all going to work. And so from there, Joe Biden and the Democratic Party have a question to ask themselves, which is truly, do they think Joe Biden can win under these circumstances with a supercharged Donald Trump and a supercharged base? Because frankly, I don't think they've got the gumption. I don't think they've got that dog in them. I don't think they can do it. A lot of people are noticing already by on his knees in front of the Lord, you know what he already means. Yeah, it was a lot. Bullpup33 says, in case you missed it, Trump will get full Secret Service protection next week once he's the official nominee. Right now, he has the B team. Him being the official nominee doesn't really matter. And so, again, that's not necessarily the correct thing. He is an ex-president. So he's gotten pretty good Secret Service, like the same Secret Service that Obama and George W. Bush have gotten, perhaps better because, you know, I'll just say that George W. Bush and Barack Obama are less active of threats than maybe Donald Trump, who's actively running for president and was just more of a polarizing figure, and Joe Biden, who is the current president, and, you know, Bill Clinton, who exterior threats are not the thing most threatening to Bill Clinton right now. It's death knocking on his door himself. Not to be morbid, but like, have you seen the guy recently? Have you seen Bill Clinton recently? Looks like he's auditioning to be the president of death. Anyways, yeah, thank you for Pinkerbell for saying former presidents get Secret Service for life. So he's got a good team of Secret Service. Again, like I said, Donald Trump is the most recent president, and he's not, you know, necessarily an uncontroversial figure. He's a very active figure. So yeah, as Selena Mary says, I tend to agree. Trump is thrilled right now. He's a branding guy. He knows this elevates his image, and that's absolutely going to do nothing but that. And Sarah Layla, you're right. He has had plenty of protection. Even though we're going to be very far removed from the facts. So they're going to say, and a lot of people are saying, that this is something that the Democrats, or, you know, the Democrats are put together. NBC News is reporting here. I'll play the clip, actually.
You've been tracking. Ken, good morning to you. Let's talk about some of the responses that you've been tracking since the shooting unfolded. A lot of the rhetoric has been blaming Democrats for the attack coming from the right. What is the reasoning that's being used? And then how are Democrats responding to that?
Good morning, Kate. Yeah, that's right. Several Republican members of Congress have directly blamed President Biden, the Democrats, and the media for the assassination attempt. They claim it was the result of overheated rhetoric about Trump and part of a campaign to jeopardize his safety. So, for example, Georgia Republican Congressman Mike Collins posted, quote, "Joe Biden sent the orders." And Trump campaign surrogate Nick Adams posted on social media, quote, "Joe Biden's rhetoric is directly responsible. There can be no discussion. This is a fact." And then right-wing journalist Sean Davis wrote that, quote, "Deranged Democrats knew Biden couldn't win, so they incited one of their toadies to try and take out his opponent."
Now, I'm sure he's going to explain a lot of what's wrong with this here. From what we know just initially about this guy, that the shooter, he is a white 20-year-old. He graduated high school in 2022. He's from the greater Pittsburgh suburban area. The weapon that he used in this attempted shooting was, well, I guess it was a shooting, because let's be clear, he did kill one person, injured several others, Donald Trump included. So the gun that was used in the shooting belonged to his father. And we know that he was actually, this kid was a registered Republican, although he had donated $15 to the Democratic fundraising vehicle known as Act Blue, which could be a part of, you know, any particular local candidate. It could be a national candidate. I'm not sure. This is going to be relevant later, that $15 donation to Act Blue, because that's pretty much the only inclination, at least we have initially, of his status of being a Democrat. His social media seems pretty sparse, considering he was a 22-year-old, a 20-year-old rather, graduated in 2022 from high school. And so there's still things being investigated by the time I post this clip, and as you know, later and later I post this information is going to be a little bit outdated. But the Republicans who acted on even more outdated information are something to be reckoned with.
Now, it's obviously true that Democrats have called Donald Trump an authoritarian and a threat to democracy, but they've never hinted that violence was an appropriate response to that. And of course, after this shooting, Democrats, including President Biden, have condemned it in the strongest possible terms, and they've called this political violence a threat to democracy. So that's where we stand on that. And experts are worried that this kind of rhetoric, increases the risk of more violence.
Well, that's just what I was going to ask. Are you hearing from your sources, from people who monitor this kind of chatter online, that there are concerns about other political violence?
Yeah, unfortunately, there are those concerns. Extremists have been seizing on this incident. So Telegram channels for branches of the Proud Boys militia group have been calling for civil war and violence. According to Advanced Democracy, that's an NGO that tracks this stuff, a user on one forum wrote that the Democratic National Committee, rhinos, and the feds, quote, should all be hung in the streets of D.C. And users on a pro-Trump platform, patriots.win, are calling for violence and civil war. One user wrote, "War now. They don't want to live and let live." So some really dangerous rhetoric coursing around out there, Kate.
And then at the same time, you've got political leaders on both sides of the aisle. I think of the Speaker of the House this morning saying, we need to tamp down the rhetoric. We need to take down the temperature. Are you seeing any evidence of that?
Well, unfortunately, yes. A lot of mainstream politicians often speak that way, and that's great. But then you have these other kind of flame-throwing politicians, some of the quotes I read earlier, who are not doing that at all. And so as long as there is some group of people who are throwing gasoline on the fire, there are sort of a group of deranged individuals out there that are listening to it, paying close attention, and think they are in essentially a civil war, Kate.
People who think they're essentially in a civil war. Yeah, that is certainly my favorite. Now stop. There we go. There we go. So the other thing that's being used right now is Biden's so-called bullseye remark. This remark was made during a call, and I'll read you the quote right here. The quote that's being used, the main part of it is that I have one job, and that's to beat Donald Trump. I'm absolutely certain I'm the best to be able to do that. So we're done talking about the debate. It's time to put Trump in the bullseye. Republicans are using that of all things, to give examples of when Joe Biden has, called for violence. And, they're also citing instances where Donald Trump, or, the Democratic Party has said, Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy. And, we've had debates on Power Report about the Democratic Party using the existential threats to democracy sort of argument here. And that has been, well within political rhetoric, well within, in order to it's usually Democrats saying Donald Trump's an existential threat to democracy. That's why we have to beat him in November. And with that context, it's very clear you're talking about an election result. You want to beat him in November in time for the elections. Very clear, very obvious, apparently not to a lot of people. Or, not to enough people so that people who know what's meant by that phrasing and know the difference between when it's regular framing and when it's not are still willing to use that because they believe people are stupid. And that's what you're seeing from a lot of Republicans right now. There's a tweet from J.D. Vance, for example. It says, today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. So yeah, that's the same point where they're not saying he needs to be stopped at all costs. Mainstream pundits aren't really even saying he needs to be stopped at all costs. The law is saying he needs to be stopped by legal means, and politicians especially Democratic politicians, but many Republican politicians. That needs to be noted as well, and a whole bunch of independents and non-voters, and people who are not part of the two-party system. RFK Jr., not someone I like, but he's gotten a lot of attention. All of these people in America also believe that you have to stop Donald Trump in a political context. You talk about other people, and, this is the First Amendment that everyone tries to fight for, right? But none of these politicians have raised the bar to the level that Donald Trump has. And if you need a reminder of that, Jenny Cohn, who covers Christian nationalism, put together, and you can find a newsletter at the Crown newsletter, it's on Substack, put together a number of examples of Donald Trump's, times where he's incited violence. So here is one example where Trump was at CPAC in 2022. This is August of 2022, so almost 2 years ago, talking about the alleged conspiracy to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And you'll see how Trump talked about this here when we're talking about who was really inciting violence.
As another example, the sting that they did involving Gretchen Whitmer was fake, just like those who instigated January 6th. It was a fake deal, fake. It was a fake deal. Gretchen Whitmer was in less danger than the people sitting in this room right now, it seems to me. And you look to see what happened, and trials are going on all over the place. And I guess a lot of people, Tudor, are being exonerated, aren't they? Huh? They're being exonerated. As another example.
So, this is a very serious thing. There was a plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer from the governor's office in Michigan. And you had people who were charged for this. This is terrible. This is in the wake of January 6th, which you're already seeing people say, okay, well, this completely erases January 6th because, there are people on the Republican side who believe this is a tit for tat world, which goes back into this victim mentality the Republicans have that, oh, well, if there are people who are saying that you have DEI and having to respect gender pronouns, then I want you to respect the fact that I'm a Christian and my pronouns are red, white, and blue, American flag, patriot, and ass kicking. That's just one example. Remember when Paul Pelosi was assaulted by someone with a hammer who had gotten to into Nancy Pelosi's house? This happened. This is how Trump responded to that.
And we'll stand up to crazy Nancy Pelosi who ruined San Francisco. How's her husband doing, by the way? Anybody know? And she's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
So there, he's just joking about this, attempt against Nancy Pelosi's husband's life. And so, now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe that Joe Biden's the one who's inciting violence. He's creating this environment where we're lackadaisical towards violence. Del Sol Verde saying Dan brings receipts. I said more on that later because I told you I've got receipts, and boy have I got more, because there's just so many examples of Donald Trump doing this. This is some stuff on January 6th, since it's good to be talking about it. This is from the January 6th hearings, actually, where this is someone who was speaking on the January 6th hearing. So I'm going to get to that right now. One moment.
At the Capitol, supporters at the Capitol, and I quote, "We're doing what they should be doing." This is what he told his staff as they pleaded with him to call off the mob, to instruct his supporters to leave. Over a series of hearings in the coming weeks, you will hear testimony, live and on video, from more than half a dozen former White House staff in the Trump administration, all of whom were in the West Wing of the White House on January 6th. You will hear testimony that, quote, "The president did not really want to put anything out, calling off the riot or asking his supporters to leave." You will hear that President Trump was yelling and, quote, "really angry at advisors who told him he needed to be doing something more." And aware of the rioters' chance to hang Mike Pence, the president responded with this sentiment, quote, "Maybe our supporters have the right idea. Mike Pence, quote, deserves it." You will hear evidence that President Trump refused for hours to do what his staff, his family, and many of his other advisors begged him to do: immediately instruct his supporters to stand down and evacuate the Capitol.
That is Donald Trump saying, "Go ahead and hang Mike Pence. I don't care. The Capitol rioters are doing exactly what I want them to do. We don't care about the rule of law. We don't care that Capitol Police are under attack. This is what we know, and this is what we all saw with our own lying eyes, the rhetoric that Donald Trump was talking about." J.D. Vance, once again, he said that the central premise of the Biden campaign is that Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. This is the same thing that's like, words aren't violence. How can you say that words are violence? This is the same people who say that. And now they're saying, oh, well, now there's Donald Trump. This rhetoric led to Trump's attempted assassination. What rhetoric? Remember, Biden's appeal, his broad mainstream appeal, was a return to normalcy, that we can go back to brunch. This whole sense of like, he's not going to be the one angrily spouting off on social media or angrily yelling and calling people names and getting into fights and being vindictive with his enemies. And, you know, like all politicians, less so. But Donald Trump was an extreme, and people had agreed that we did not want to see any more of that. And yet, you are seeing more of that. You're seeing substantially more of that, frankly. So, I have more. Yes, I have more. Here's, oh, and this goes on for a really long time. So we can be here all day, but I'm going to keep going. Remember in 2018, when Trump was talking about Greg Gianforte, who was a political candidate, who had body slammed someone at one of his rallies? Yeah, well, here's what Trump said to that when a politician was body slamming a regular person, when we're talking about heightening up the political rhetoric and the political discourse here.
But Greg is smart. And by the way, never wrestle him. You understand that? Never. Any guy that can do a body slam, he's my guy. He's my guy. I shouldn't say the truth, but there's nothing to be embarrassed about. So I was in Rome with a lot of the leaders from other countries talking about all sorts of things, and I heard about it. And we endorsed Greg very early. But I had heard that he body slammed a reporter. And he was way up. And I said, oh, this was like the day of the election or just before. And I said, oh, this is terrible. He's going to lose the election. Then I said, well, wait a minute. I know Montana pretty well. I think it might help him. And it did.
I think it might help him, and it did, when he body slammed a reporter. Because he knows Montana. There's, of course, that instance where Donald Trump was wielding a bat next to that Republican DA. Oh, that's the wrong way. Whoops. There's that time where Donald Trump was holding up the photo of him by the bat next to the DA in Manhattan with one of his cases. There's that quote from Donald Trump saying, if you see someone with a tomato, knock the crap out of them, because remember, I'll pay your legal fees. Donald Trump saying that he'd like to punch a protester in the face. You know, like, this is just who he is. So, Joe Biden, when the whole premise of Joe Biden being elected was during COVID and after the Black Lives Matter protests, where Donald Trump was calling the protesters practicing their First Amendment looters, saying that when the looting starts, the shooting starts, threatening to use federal force against protesters in different cities, doing so in several cases. Someone who's talking about right now, let alone just forget the stuff that's in Project 2025. He's talked about codifying America being a Christian nation through all these other different disparate policies and bills. He's talked about, you know, just removing homeless people, just like pushing them out of the cities into the deserts where, like, you know, they'll absolutely no care for people. And not like we're going to create systems or establish an economy that's going to protect people from getting to that point where they are housing insecure. All the stuff with immigration, all the stuff with tamping down on things politically, all of these legal sycophants on his side getting ready to defend anything he does is all a bad sign. It is all a very bad look right now. And so yeah. Watch out, y'all. Watch the hell out. Politics is going to be very interesting for the rest of this election cycle. And this is a really good opportunity to let you know that we need your support as a Syndicate 23 member, or as a YouTube member, or as a Twitch member. Thank you for the super chats, sending those in. We really appreciate those as well. Even if you can't donate monthly, but you can donate, oh, you got a good paycheck here, or made a good point here, you really like this coverage there. We appreciate any of it and all of it, because you've seen Ryan Grimm and you've seen Jeremy Scahill leave where they worked at to start new networks. You've seen 404 Media and Defector and a number of other different places and people leave to start their own networks. The journalists you love and have been loving, if you've been paying attention to politics for years, or, you know, the thought leaders of this space, if you are newer to this political space, we are fighting to continue doing the work that we're doing and to make sure that there is a future for folks who want to carry the torch afterwards. And that's dependent on the support you're able to give to outlets like ours and like theirs today. So a Syndicate 23 membership, join.syndicate23.co, gives us most of the profit sharing. There's not as many fees, and it goes directly to our co-op, and you get more members content. But if you're watching on YouTube and Twitch, and that's how you usually do memberships, and that's easier, go ahead. Please feel free to do that. I'll read some comments here. Jules, don't forget his attacks on the LGBTQ. Absolutely. And his party's attacks that he's happy to do. Yeah, he'll take it off the party. He'll take it off of the party platform. But best believe that he's going to look the other way when Republican politicians attack LGBTQ plus rights across the country. Mandan, important coverage. Thank you. I try. When will Bam get away from his abusive YouTube boss and start his own network? Bam's free to do whatever he wants to. Jan Bornair saying drop site news. Yes, check out drop site news. That's where Jeremy Scahill and Ryan Grimm are right now. Anti-corporate is saying, I'd be surprised if Trump's ever been to Montana for anything besides a campaign stop, if that. Yeah, I agree. He doesn't even like that stuff. Left of the box. I'm doing a live stream when you're done. I'll have the Canadian angle. I'm going to look for that and see if I can link through to it before I am off. But yeah, thank you very much. This is going to be and Pinkerbell saying earlier, play this shit on loop. Absolutely. Yeah, well, Sandy, if you have this, if your live stream almost ready to go, then I will try to link to it. Let's see, can I? I still haven't been able to figure out like how to like link out to other videos as they're happening, unfortunately. So that has been a little bit of a struggle. I think I have to do it with the video that's already live. So we will have to coordinate it somehow. Left of the box. No, there isn't. Well, I'll find like a recent video that you have done, and people will hopefully go to there. But yes. People should go and check out youtube.com/leftofthebox for that. Okay. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to cut this up into clips and then see you all tomorrow. This is, well, not tomorrow, most likely, but I will see you later. Anyways, thank you. Peace. Also, I saw your note for what you can do on how to do them, so I thank you for that. Take care, and we'll see you soon.